gets to introducing ourselves. So if you can please join the meetings online, that would be really good, because then you can ask your questions that way, and then we can keep track of things that way. So I won't be the only one here answering questions and just providing assistance. So I have other people that will get to introduce ourselves in a few minutes. So quick information about me. So my name is David Okeode. I'm the EMEA CTO of Azure at Palo Alto Networks, which some of you may know. I'm a big Microsoft customer. So I've written 2 books on Azure security. I'm always in the Azure security community and all that stuff. You can check out my blog on davidokeode.medium.com. So we have someone else that's joining remotely. So someone who I've heard of him so much, his blogs has helped me solve a lot of issues in the past. So nice to see him on this call. Hello, Sam, are you there? Are you there, Sam? Can you hear us? Hello, Sam. Yeah.
No.
Okay, yeah. Oh, okay. So I'll just go ahead and introduce Sam. So anyway, we have Sam Kogan also. So Sam Kogan is also joining us online. So Sam, he has a blog, so samkogan.com. So again, really, really useful blog. And blogs on a lot of things relating to DevOps, relating to cloud native applications. And he's also a Microsoft Azure MVP. And I'll let Leila introduce herself.
Hello, yes, my name's Layla Porter. I am a Microsoft MVP for developer technologies. I'm a GitHub star, and I am a developer advocate for .NET at VMware, and I'm the founder of the Women of .NET initiative. I'm not a super expert on DevSecOps, so I'm going to be voicing the dumb questions. So I shall try and be the voice of, oh, I don't know if I feel I can ask that. I will ask those, okay? So you can telepathically tell me the questions you want to be asked. And yeah, so you can find me. I'm Layla Codes at just about everywhere but GitHub. But if you go to layla.dev, that links to all my stuff on the interweb. So you can find me there. So David.
Nice, nice. Thanks very much, Leila. So we thought that I will probably do this. We'll do a brief introduction of just the topic that we are going over, and then we'll just be available to take any questions that you have. So for those that are joining us online also, thanks very much for joining. So you can also use the chat window to ask questions. And again, if we're able to answer the questions, we'll be happy to answer them. So just some quick information around this. I really like the image in the lower left corner. So credits to Pete Cheslock for that. That's sort of like where things are, right? So you have like DevOps moving at this amazing pace, by delivering software at an amazing pace, but security really struggling to catch up. Right? That's the reality. And I was reading some stats earlier about you look at the rate at which code development is growing, and at the same rate you see vulnerabilities growing at almost the same rate. So that means we're writing more code, but we're also creating more risks for organization. So about 83% of applications have at least one security flaw in it, and that's from recent studies from GitHub. So over 90% of repositories use open source dependencies, which means you're not just worrying about your own code, you're worrying about other people's code that you're using. How much do you trust them? But apart from that, what about the dependencies of those codes, right? So I think there's something like about 93% of like NPM packages that people are using actually has other dependencies. So you have like these transitive dependencies, dependencies of dependencies that you have to worry about. So DevSecOps about providing frictionless security for the modern software supply chain. So I like that definition very much, right? So this is not just about, I like the session that happened earlier. This is not just about taking existing security tools and then trying to retrofit it into development processes. This is about taking tools that are developed from a security perspective, but are developed for the developer partner in organizations. So it's about security must preserve developer productivity. So we must ensure that productivity is kept. We're able to develop at a rapid pace, while at the same time reducing the risk that we're introducing. And it's also about empowering developers beyond the ability to accelerate builds and deployment. I was seeing some stats from Google the other day. So you see like continuous build, continuous integration. Majority of organizations are good with that. You see like 80% adoption. When it comes to continuous security, you see like about 30% adoption. So that means we're not really doing well when it comes to continuous security or security in our DevOps practices. So one of the things that I'm sure some of you may have questions on will be around GitHub Advanced Security. So GitHub is one of Microsoft developer platforms alongside Azure DevOps. In GitHub Advanced Security, you have these tools that are built from a developer's perspective, right? So these are not retrofitted tools. These are tools that work with the developer flow, works with the developer process, and you can consume the security capabilities, not just creating more work for you, but creating something that can help you to just reduce the issues that you're pushing out to production. So I think that that's sort of like just a quick overview around that. So, regarding cloud developer environment, you have recent announcement with Microsoft DevBox, which I've signed up for a private preview. If you've not yet signed up for that, I encourage you to do so. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. You have GitHub code spaces where you can spin up an isolated environment, get access to VS Code, your security assessment tools wherever you go, anywhere in the world. And there was even like a demonstration of someone coding in the toilet the other day.
Why not?
Because you've got access to like this massive, compute anywhere you go. So, okay. So I think we just hang around. So if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer your questions. So who has the first question for us today? So let me probably start by saying how many people are using Azure DevOps in terms of how you deploy. So can see quite a lot of hands. So how many people are currently using GitHub platform? Can see less hands. So it's a very interesting one, right? So I like the way someone at Microsoft put it. They said you can think of sort of like the transition between those two platforms as electric cars versus just normal cars that use diesel or petrol or whatever they use. So that's where we are. A lot of organizations are currently still using Azure DevOps. But in terms of like some of the cool capabilities that are coming with GitHub code spaces, the Copilot, and the AI peer, that's all that is in GitHub, right? So that's sort of like where things are going to be. But again, if you have any questions regarding DevSecOps or any of these other things that we talked about, we'll be happy to answer the question.
So we have our first question on the chat, and this is from CRA. I'm really sorry if I butchered that name. And they say, from my experience and viewpoint as well, security is doomed to lag behind, especially when the business demands and delivery speed increases. Do you agree or disagree? And what is your experience? Go for it, David.
Do I agree or disagree? I'll say I neither agree nor disagree in that security are doomed to always play catch up. I mean, there's a part of that that's true, right? Because security is a constantly evolving landscape. The better you do, the more the attackers also do. So they always, everything always changes. But from that collaborative perspective, I think we're sort of like getting to that place. So the only way it can work is for security and developers to collaborate. And there was like a drive initially to do that collaboration in a way that does not work, which is we're going to take our existing tools and we're just going to try to get you to use our existing tools to do security checks and do security assessment. But now the industry is sort of like evolving to where security is now becoming something native, something that's normal to your development workflow. So a good example of that would be maybe you commit code into your repositories, and as part of the code reviews that you're getting, just a normal part of it that you get from your teammates, you're also getting security assessment as a normal part of that. But then taking that a step further, tools also suggesting fixes to you, the same way your colleagues will suggest fixes to you, right? So I don't think that it's true that it's always going to lag behind. It's probably there right now, just due to some evolution that's going on. But at the same time, things are also improving rapidly, right? So, so that's not a clear answer, but yeah, I neither agree or disagree with that.
Have we got any questions in the room if you want to ask so far? Yes.
good question. So here's an SK, one that I actually blogged about like in the past on my on my blog. So yeah, that's gone away now. So I'm not sure what Microsoft are replacing that with. But I do have suggestions around like some open source tools that you can leverage with regards to that. So open source tools like Chekhov, I'm not sure if you're familiar with like tools like Chekhov. Yeah. So tools like Chekhov, it's a great tool. So it does ARM templates, it does some other ones. So yeah, so I'll probably recommend like looking at maybe some open source tools and seeing how those can help with regards to that. I think Microsoft AIM, well, don't let me put words into Microsoft Word now. It's Microsoft Mouth now. So, but yeah, so I would say look into like other alternatives like Chekhov and some other tools that does ARM template assessment. Chekhov is the one that comes to my mind because that's the one that I use.
And we'll try and repeat those questions for those in chat because I know they didn't hear that question there. So we'll try and do that. So I have a question for you, David. If you're new to this sort of thing and you want to start considering DevSecOps, where's a really good place to start? Where can we start increasing our knowledge and what's a good place to just learn and practice and implement what you know?
Yeah. In terms of learning and practicing, Microsoft Learn is definitely a good place to start. So the new modules that Microsoft have started adding around security in the developer space. So I recommend probably checking out some of those modules on Microsoft Learn. But in terms of implementing that in practice within your organization, so again, I've worked with different organizations. I've seen them trying to adopt some of these DevSecOps practices. I think the approach that's probably better is to start small, right? Look for places where you can get up like the quick wins in your organization and start from there. So, and then implement like a feedback loop where you get feedback as to how effective what you've implemented, how effective it's working, and then just do continuous improvement and just gradually bring in other practices over time. So trying to implement everything at once, I've seen that overwhelm teams. People go, this is just creating more work for me. I'm getting too many alerts. It's not effective. You're just making, like what someone said, if you ask developers and you say, what do you enjoy doing? Hardly when anyone say I enjoy doing security. so so it's not like a big part of what developers enjoy doing. So I've seen people try to just force that through, push that through, and just ended up like worse than where they started.
That leads us quite well into another question, which was, let's just scroll down. Should we encourage security as part of the MVP, the minimum viable product? If we get stakeholders behind it from the start, could it help us reduce the 83% security flaw?
Yes, definitely. So that's the only way it's going to work. I was looking at, again, stats on deployment the other day. Like you see, like organizations that are adopting more cloud native services, which is where you should be heading towards, they're doing more and more deployment. Security cannot afford to be, we're going to be validating every release that you're doing. It's not going to work, right? If you're doing tens of releases every week, the only way that can work is security comes in and assesses the pipeline, assesses the supply chain, assesses your processes, gives recommendation, gives guidance, implements that. They come back to do a review, you iterate over that, you improve over that. So, and that needs to be at the very beginning of the life cycle, including the planning phase, right? So where you're doing your threat modeling. So there is some vulnerabilities more recently. I won't mention the name of the companies and everything that was involved there. But some of those issues are basic issues where if they had someone who understands security right at the very beginning of that, those kind of issues would not have happened, right? So I definitely agree with that. So right at the very beginning of your planning, make sure you have people that have security knowledge, security skills involved, right? So do your threat modeling right at the very start, right? And make sure that security is included as part of every other process going forward.
All right, so we have one from Danny. With rapid advancements in AI, how high is the risk to security in terms of hackers using it? And are there any plans to enhance security using AI? If so, how?
Yeah, good question also. So in terms of attackers using AI, it's a very interesting one. But yeah, let's not go down that path in too much detail. It's a very interesting one. I think I've seen seen this really just mentioned in terms of research, in terms of actual like attacks. At least I'm not aware of any. Maybe you're aware of one.
You can't
No,
answer
no,
it.
no problem. So, yeah. So in terms of that, so I've not really seen that like in practice. It's just like mainly in research papers that you see like this AI versus AI like scenario. But in terms of AI helping us, I mean, think about like the co-pilot. That's what came to my mind when I saw that from a security perspective. Like you're doing your coding, and as you're doing your coding, instead of you're just using tools, which is what we have now, that's just recommending to you and say, you need to go fix that. And maybe it's going to point you to a document that you need to go read. How about it recommends to you as you're doing that, right? Security best practices. I think that's probably where it's going to end up, where you're going to begin to take existing security data and you're going to use them to train the AI models behind Copilot to where it understands secure coding practices and it's able to help developers. But then at that point, then maybe the attackers would have also advanced to another level, and then we have something else to deal with.
And then it's Skynet. So another question here. Many enterprises use, for an example, JFrog, SonarQube for static code analysis and scanning. Could you high-level compare those tools to the newly released GitHub features? Should the companies use it all together, but by different stakeholders, devs and security, for an example, or they can be superseded?
Yeah, that's quite a lot of questions there. So we want me to compare Sonar Cloud or Sonar Cube with Microsoft GitHub Advanced Security. So I probably won't give you like a competitive analysis right here. What I would say is you have to look at what you're assessing, right? So sometimes I see when people are looking at tooling, you have to look at what you're assessing. Are you assessing application code? Are you assessing dependencies? Are you assessing infrastructure code? Like ARM templates? If you're assessing application code, what languages are you using in your organization, right? If you're assessing dependencies, what dependencies are you using? Because then you have to look at something like GitHub Advanced Security. What does it support? What about SonarQube? What does it support? If you're using Go, does GitHub Advanced Security support Go? Does SonarQube support Go? What are you looking for? Are you looking just for just coding issues, right? Maybe code smell issues, code quality issues. Are you looking for application dependency vulnerabilities? Are you looking for compliance issue maybe regarding to open source licensing? So what you find is that when you do this analysis, you find that some tools cover some aspects, and then you'll be able to realize the gaps that you have, right? So another example, malware, right? Are you going to be doing malware assessment? So you have to look at all of these different components: application code, application dependency, infrastructure code, configuration code, right? And all the different aspects of security that you want to assess for and compliance that you want to assess for. And then you use that to sort of like compare the tool set. And then what you may find in many cases is you have to use a combination of tools together. But the thing about it is that it's not really about the tools, because security, for it to work the way that we're talking about, it should be frictionless, right? It should get to a place where it does not feel as if you're doing security. It just feels as if you're just doing normal coding, right? So there should be less emphasis on the tools versus like the actual capabilities, and in terms of how they help you to make things much more easy and smooth. So that's my thoughts on that.
So I have another question. I told you I'd be bringing up my dumb questions. So if we have some kind of security breach, what sort of processes should we put in place to learn from those and make sure they don't happen again?
It depends on what type of breach that you're referring to. So let's
dependencies, see. Maybe. I'm thinking of the whole log4j. Log4j, was it?
Yeah. Yes.
J for log, J for log, log4j, J for log, one of those. That's it. Okay, there. That kind of thing. Yep. That was a huge incident. Yep. How can we maybe look at that and then prevent that from happening in the future?
Very good one. So with regards to that, I'll make a point relating to that first of all. So we should be very careful not to take things to extremes when we talk about things like DevSecOps, because one other area that I've seen is people going, hey, we're just going to do a lot of this assessment over here, forget all this other operational stuff that you're doing, anything that you're doing at runtime, forget all this other stuff. We're just going to do all this assessment here. Well, it does not work that way, right? Because there will always be zero-day vulnerabilities that you did not know about before. Things will happen. So that's where like your runtime security always still has that sort of like the backstop to be able to help you to handle some of those. Like in the case of Log4j, people that had like maybe like web application firewalls, using something like Azure Application Gateway, were still able to have like rules written to identify exploits that are trying to take advantage of those vulnerabilities and stop this and that level, giving them enough space, enough room to be able to like do like the patching. But I guess like one lesson to really take away from there is also making sure that you have automated fixes as part of like your continuous processes. So it's not just about like the continuous like integration, but also you have like those automated processes to be able to like fix some of those issues when they get discovered or identified.
Cool. So let's see if we've got some. I know that Sam has been really super quick at answering a lot of these.
He told you.
So here's one from Phil. What does a mature DevSecOps pipeline look like? I'm interested in learning the level of automation you'd recommend to close the feedback loop from suboptimal code to secure deployment. Do you add tickets from a static scanner into your backlog, etc.?
Yeah. So what does if I could log into an environment, I'll show you an example, an example of one. But what that looks like is so let's take like maybe a sample pipeline where you're creating an application. Let's say like Java application. You're going to containerize Java application, deploy it into AKS. At the end of that, what that involves is right at the point of before you even commit code, you have capabilities to help developers identify when there's security risk in what they're creating, right? So whether that's tools that's native, that's installed on their PCs, whether that's third-party tooling that you're using, you have ways for them to be able to do that. And maybe you're integrating that with something like Git hooks, right? So whenever they do a commit, before that gets committed, it actually does an initial assessment. But then you take that further to where they do like their CI, where they do their continuous integration. Of course, you have security checks in all of those places, right? So maybe you're going to be leveraging, maybe as part of like your pull request, you have process that's going to run like a branch policy that's going to trigger like all these assessments for that to happen. And then maybe before you even build the code, maybe you assess like what that's doing. So, and a good example of that is maybe you're going to be using Dockerfile to create your container image. Well, you can identify security issues while it's still a Docker file before it becomes a container image, and you can identify it quicker. So like you're doing assessment of things like your container infrastructure as code, your Docker files, your Kubernetes manifest files, and then you take that further to where you do the build. And then before you push it into the registry, to a container registry, you do like the continuous assessment of that. While it's in the registry, because there's 0 days, you have a continuous assessment going on at that phase. And again, you have feedback loop at all of these stages. And when you take the image from the container registry to deploy, you do another assessment. And then you take that to deployment, and then you have like your runtime protection in place where potentially you've pushed like your config policies together with that. So I know it's a lot of stuff that I've mentioned, but the key thing is security and compliance assessment embedded at every single phase, and ideally as seamless as possible, something that it's there, it's doing what it's meant to be doing. I love like the GitHub Advanced Securities review capabilities where that's just there, right? It just feels like you have another another partner in your organization that's helping you out as you're doing like your coding versus something that you're just getting a bunch of alerts and then documentations to go read.
Cool. Right. Let's have a look.
Is it possible for us to get Sam like audio? It'd be interesting for him to get some of his thoughts on this also, if he's able to.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Sam.
There you go. Okay.
First of all, before you go ahead, let me say thank you again for your blog. So your blog post has saved me a lot of time, right?
No problem.
And by the way, Sam, actually, you know what? When I was writing my own blog post on Azure, the AZSK that was just asking the question, I referred to your blog. Do you have an answer for that? I think Sam definitely have an answer for you. So AZSK you know, the tool that Microsoft had for ARM template assessment.
Yep.
What's replacing that on Microsoft side?
So nothing. So you're talking about the TTK, the test toolkit piece? Yeah, so nothing's replacing that at the moment. So it's a Microsoft project, but it is open source, and it's still being developed, and it works with Bicep templates as well. Well, you kind of compile them to ARM and then test them, but it works that way. So yeah, the actual toolkit still works. And actually recently the DevOps extension that I wrote for that, I've released a new version of that, which works cross-platform as well.
Yeah.
So if you've got Linux build agents, use that one as well. But yeah, it's still going strong as far as I know.
Yeah, by the way, I completely forgot that you did write the DevOps extension for that. So again, thanks very much. You've saved a lot of teams. So thanks very much for that. Okay.
All right, so we've got time for a few more questions. So how important is container vulnerability scanning when using trusted images like Microsoft.NET containers?
Okay, zero trust, right? Trust no one, right? Principles of zero trust. So verify explicit or validate explicitly. So nothing is to be nothing is to be trusted. So lots of people trusted Apache, right? So Log4j vulnerability. So you do your assessment regardless. So yeah, so it's zero trust principles. You have to, use your least privileged access. You have to validate explicitly, and you have to make sure that you assume that there's going to be issues relating to the question that you talked about. And this principle also applies to everything, right? So.
All right, and we have, does Microsoft plan to shift the security left even more and bring the scanning features to the VS Code and Visual Studio IDEs?
Very good question. So I'll also let Sam, I'll let you also contribute to this. So, but if I remember correctly, I believe that Bicep has like a native linter. I did look at it. It didn't have quite as much like security assessment yet, but it had a few, right?
Yeah. So there's some. It's mainly around linting rather than security. So it's running the TTK after that for those templates is a more best practice. But I just added a comment into the chat there about just general coding. If you do use GitHub Advanced Security, there is a CodeQL plugin for Visual Studio that can do sort of development time suggestions as well for that. I'm sure there are other third-party ones as well, but that's the one I know about.
Yeah, and that's true. So yeah, and you got like additional tools that you can use to sort of like assess that. But again, I'm looking forward to the time when all of this will be all part of like the AI pair, and it just needs to help me as I write secure code as I go. And then you know what, like there was this thing about like natural language to, well, anyways, natural language to that, where I can just say, write me a secure code that does this, and then just, okay.
Yeah, I know with Visual Studio, just prompting everything I'm writing, it just needs to prompt in, hey, Layla, you've written something really insecure here. You should maybe rethink that. That would be quite useful.
Yep.
So any more questions from the room?
Yep. So I do have like maybe I have one question for Sam, and then before we round off, sorry, apologies. So Sam, so what's your thought with regards to the question that was asked earlier around, do you think that security will always play catch up behind behind like the pace of development, or do you think that, or do you agree or disagree? The question said.
To a lot, at least currently, I do kind of agree. There's always a bit of friction between development and security. Developers, and not even necessarily developers, but product owners want to get things out of the door. And the security guy is more coming from a risk view and wanting to make sure it's risk-free, although it's never going to be risk-free. There's always an element of conflict there. I think you can try and reduce this by building in your security from the start, rather than, a lot of times I will see teams who are trying to release a product and security comes during the release process and it's too late at that point. Build it in from the start doing things like threat modeling,